Well, hello, everybody. So good to see you again. I woke up this morning so excited to get to come to Athens Church. And I'm not just saying that to flatter you, but if you're kind of checking this place out, kicking the tires, trying to figure out, are these my people? I hope that you'll choose to make this church your church. If I lived in Athens, I certainly would. My wife and I live in Atlanta, and just like you, we're trying to figure out how to live, and in our case, we're raising kids and trying to have as great of a marriage as possible and trying to figure out how to deal with this wild world. I mean, I know we talk about it all the time, but it is just crazy to think how different life is right now than it was even 2 years ago. Our world has just changed so drastically. Every conversation you're in now, you pay the COVID tax, where you spend the first 10 minutes of the conversation talking about COVID, and in some ways appropriately so, right? I mean, it has been devastating on so many different levels, both economically and in regard to mental health, and even in regard to so many people's health as well. I sat down just this past week, sat down for lunch at a restaurant just about a mile from where we live, and sitting there with a friend that I met years ago when we were serving together as high school volunteers at what we call Inside Out. And hadn't seen him in a while. And something in my head, as soon as he sat down, I thought, I think I've seen on Instagram that you just went on a ridiculous vacation. You know how you have that, where you follow somebody on social media, but you can't keep track of all of it all the time. So much stuff flying at us. So I said that. I said, hey, didn't y'all just go on like a ridiculous vacation? And this guy has a lot of money. So ridiculous vacations, it wasn't Panama City, which is a wonderful place, okay? But it was some exotic island, and he was like, yeah, we did. And he was like, have you not heard about it? And I was like, no. And he was like, well, can I tell you about it? I was like, yeah, please do. He said, so, the way it was, it was a wedding anniversary. We were going to go a couple years ago. We had to delay it. We're going to go last year. We're going to delay it. This year, we were like, we're doing it. We're going. And he said we had to take the COVID test to get in. It was about quite a long flight to this exotic, beautiful island. And he said the room we were staying in had 3 walls. Didn't even have 4 walls. 3 walls. And you just looked out over the mountains, beautiful ocean. I mean, he was like, it was just ridiculous. It was so nice. Get there on Sunday, Monday, everything's amazing. We had to take the COVID test coming in, negative. And then on Tuesday, he said, I started feeling bad. And I was like, oh no. So he goes and takes a test, and he tests positive for COVID. And I know HIPAA, I'm not supposed to say that, but I didn't tell you the guy's name or anything. So he said, I immediately tell my wife, I'm like, hey, you got to go to the airport right now and fly home, because what they didn't realize until they had gotten into the process is that where they were, this particular country has some of the strictest COVID policies and COVID protocols in the world. And so he knew, okay, this is going to be a challenge for us to figure this out. So she flies home. The hotel knows his situation, and so they send a mode of transportation for him to take him to a government-owned facility where he was going to have to quarantine for 10 days. And this particular room had 4 walls, no internet access, no television, and no direct sunlight. So I'm like, oh my goodness, that sounds terrible, to go from where you were, to go what was happening. And he was like, I know. And he said, honestly, I hit rock bottom. He's like, I've never been that. He said, I was having panic attacks. I was having health problems. I thought I was like, I'm going to die. Like, this is it. It's over. I'm going to die. And he said, fortunately, he said it got so bad. He said, I was calling everyone I knew to try to figure this out. He said, at one point, I was about a couple minutes away from paying $80,000 to have a private jet come and pick me up, which this guy can do that kind of thing, And he said, fortunately, my wife talked me out of it. So he said, about on day 7, things started getting better. He said, day 8, I called them that morning, little phone I had to order the food. And he said, I call him that morning, and I say, hey, I've run out of clothes. My clothes are all dirty. I've worn them all. So what am I supposed to do? What's the protocol around this? And they said, oh, sir, we've got it figured out. No problem. They, slipped under the door. They slipped him a little bag that he's to put all his clothes in. You can see where this is headed. And so he gives it back to them, and they call him later that afternoon, and they said, sir, we have made a terrible error. Someone saw your bag and thought it was trash and put it in the incinerator. They burned all of his clothes. All he had was like a bathing suit and a t-shirt. And I'm cracking up laughing. He's not laughing. And I'm like, did you get to the point where you were able to laugh at this? And he said, no, I'm still not there yet. So I stopped laughing, because that's the kind of friend I am. I'll only laugh at it if you're gonna laugh at it. No, but it just reminded me, we're all in different seasons of life and different moments in our life where we need salvation. We need someone to save us, someone to rescue us from our situation. Now, you're not, in hopefully a 10-day quarantine from some bougie, ridiculous vacation right now where you maybe need an escape or maybe need salvation, but all of us at different points in our life wrestle through, what does it mean? What is this idea of salvation all about? In fact, if you're a religious person, if you grew up in church or you know about the way the church works, the church talks about salvation and historically has talked about salvation for a long time, talks about it a lot. Last week, if you haven't heard John Tyson's message to kick the series off, or you didn't hear Stephen's message last week, I just can't encourage you enough to go catch up on it. But Stephen talked about what does it look like to escape. In fact, I'm still thinking about the TikTok video that you said that gal follows of the person that just creates the most delicious meals, and it's just this little brain vacation from life. I couldn't stop thinking about that as soon as I heard you say it. But I've been given the task of talking about this idea of salvation. What is the way of the world in regard to salvation? What's the way of religion in regard to salvation? And then what's the way of Jesus? Stephen gave us these definitions last week, which I thought were so simple and helpful. But here's the way we're explaining, or here's the way we're trying to understand, what is the way of the world? I mean, it's not this awful, terrible, ridiculous thing. No, it's just the culture and practices of life without God. So if you were just going, I'm just gonna live my life the way this world lives life without any thought, without any guidance, any direction from God, without any energy or mission or purpose from God, how would you live it? What would it look like? The way of religion is not necessarily the right way, right? Because I love the word that you put in there, Stephen, that it distorts God, right? That it's the culture and practices that distort God. Oftentimes, religious people trying to correct from this way can make an overcorrection. And so we get this other way of living. But we're trying to understand as best we can together. And this is a conversation. This is not something someone can just tell you. This is something we got to figure out together. Well, what is the way of Jesus? What is the way of Jesus? What are the culture? What are the practices that most glorify God? And in regard to salvation, I think we would all agree there is a particular way that the world would say, oh, here's what you need to be saved from. Here's how you need to be saved. And here's the way you can actually be saved. And so it's going to take a little bit of energy for all of us today to engage in this. This is not an easy topic. This is not a light topic. And so I would just encourage you, watching online today or even sitting in the room, as much as you can to engage with this idea. What does it mean? How do we think about salvation in regard to the way of the world? How do we think about it in regard to religion? And then how would God have us? What is the way of Jesus in regard to salvation? We got to start at the beginning, okay? So in the beginning of time, everybody agrees in some level, not everybody, but most people agree, there was some kind of beginning. I mean, at some point, it just didn't happen, or maybe you are a person that's like, no, I don't even believe in a beginning. But for most people, they would go, yeah, there's some kind of beginning, right? And however you think the beginning happened, whether it was evolution, a big bang, God created it, whatever it may be, there was some kind of beginning. And the idea of creation in regard to the way of the world is that we were born as innocent children. That we were born in this world as these little cute, perfect, pristine babies. Now, there's some danger in that, right? I mean, there's some things that we can understand about that. If you've ever held a newborn baby, it's just an amazingly miraculous moment where you just see how cute and innocent and in some ways perfect it seems. The danger of it is that we sometimes romanticize the idea of having a baby, right? We sometimes romanticize babies as well. And those of you that are parents know the danger of that, right? Have you ever seen a parent who has romanticized that child so much that they gave that child whatever that child wanted for that child's entire life, just believing this child is perfect and all this child needs is just more of everything? How does that usually go? Not great, right? I mean, that's not a great way to live life. And so there is some danger to that. The other thing that's challenging is that those babies do quickly grow up and we quickly find out, oh, they're not so perfect. I'm an example of that, I remember in 4th grade, I got a note from the teacher to my parents that said, he is engaging in excessive socialization, and they gave me a C in conduct. And so for me, that was where I first remembered, like, yeah, it isn't always working out. The way of religion in regard to the beginning is that God made a perfect world. God made a perfect world. If you go back and read the account of Genesis 1, 2, and 3, God made this perfect world. Now, it wasn't a fun world, but it was a perfect world. It wasn't a world where everything was as it seemed to be, but we don't often think about it as they had a lot of fun. No, the fun seems to come later on in the way of religion. Then we have this fall. So you have this creation, this beginning. Then there's a fall. And like any good movie, I mean, this is the way movies go, right? There's a character, and the character has a problem. This is where it's like, uh-oh, what did we do? What happened? The way of the world says that there was this trauma that was done to us. The first time I really understood this or really heard this framed in this way was from a podcast that a bunch of Athens church people, Sean being one of them, sent to me. There's an Australian pastor and a pastor from Seattle who get together to do this podcast where they laid out this idea that we begin life, that the way the world sees salvation is that we begin life as these perfect babies, and then there's this trauma done to us. It's from the outside in, that maybe someone abused you, someone didn't raise you right, or maybe parents walked out on you, or maybe you were an object of somebody else's harm. Maybe you experienced racism, or maybe you experienced sexism. Maybe you experienced some kind of traumatic event that left you going, what am I supposed to do now? The way religion explains it, religion says that the fall was because of sin, that we're sinners who have lost our way. Sin being things that I did that I shouldn't have done. Sin being things that I didn't do that I was supposed to do. That we're sinners, and because of the sin, we've experienced this separation from God. Now, what's interesting about the religious side is that everything up until this point, I would go, yeah, that's the way I see the world. That's the way I understand salvation. But then what do we do? What do we do about salvation? This is where it gets even more complicated. So what do we do about salvation? Well, when it comes to the world would say, you rediscover your true self. Freud said that, he said, what we're being saved from is we're being saved from our suppressed desires. Those appetites that are within you that other people have told you, oh, no, you can't fulfill that. And so he said, no, well then you just go and experience the joy of those. Just go try to meet those appetites, try to feed those appetites, go experience life. That you go rediscover with your true self. Maybe you work with someone, or maybe this is you, or maybe you have friends, family, maybe who would say, I'm gonna go camping this weekend just to try to go find myself. Try to recenter, right? I mean, this isn't the only reason why people do yoga, but some people do yoga for this very reason. It's why people sometimes engage in things like Soul Cycle, right? To try to go find themselves, to try to go reconnect with their true self, go find your true identity, that part of you that was innocent and perfect. The way religion says you save yourself, religion says, oh, well, you just do good. In fact, you do more good than bad. You stack up all your good deeds. You stack up all your righteousness, which this is the way, honestly, this is the way most Christians understand salvation. So they would say, oh, God created the world. It was perfect. Sin entered the world. And now I should just do as much good as I can do to try to make up for the guilt, try to get over the shame that sin left. This is people's personal experience, right? I mean, how many people do you know that have the story where grew up maybe in some kind of Christian home, or at least nominally Christian, called, check Christian on Facebook when you got your account set up, and then went off to college and lived like hell. I mean, just did whatever you wanted to do, and then the rest of your life tried to live like heaven to try to pay back all the hell. That's the way most people's story goes, right? It's honestly, it's sad, but it is true. This is the way most Christians understand salvation. Yeah, there's a God. He's kind of frustrated that I've done some bad things, and so I'm trying to do a lot of good to pay him back. So then what do we do about the afterlife, or what do we do about heaven? Well, the way of the world would not necessarily even agree with an afterlife. In general, most people do believe in some form of afterlife, but more and more we're seeing people going, no. I just think this world is a little bit like Vegas, you know? You just do everything you want to do here, and whatever happens here just stays here. That the afterlife, that heaven is basically finding pleasure because that's what leads to happiness. I just need to go find more pleasure. I need to go experience more good. I just need to go do the things. As long as it doesn't hurt anyone, I just need to go do more of the things that make me happy. Another way to put this is, have you ever heard that phrase, you do you? This is the way I hear it oftentimes now. In fact, there was this commercial, I think it was maybe an Adidas commercial. It was Russell Westbrook, great basketball player, and it's this like beautiful cinematography in the gym of him doing all these ridiculous moves. And I didn't really see it coming when I watched it because I was like, oh, it's a basketball commercial. But then he comes up to the camera, he walks up to it with a bunch of swag and looks and goes, hey, don't do they, do you. And then he walks off. And I'm like, whoa, what does he mean by that? And connect that to the movie just made on the basketball court, because I can't do what you just did, but I do feel you. I want to do me. I don't want to do they. I want to do me. What does he mean by that? I mean, you hear that over and over again. You know, somebody's like, hey, your parents want you to live that way. The world says you got to live that way. They're putting this on you, that this is what women do or this is what men do. No. Don't do they, do you, boo-boo. That's the way the world says it. They're like, go do whatever it is that makes you feel good about you. As long as it doesn't hurt anyone, you just go rediscover yourself. Go find the pleasure that's going to lead to happiness and do more of that. That's heaven in this world. What about the way of religion? Well, the way of religion says, oh, heaven is something that you earn. Heaven is something that you accrue. Heaven is something that you amount, that you build up to, build up for. This is the way the world, the culture and practices without God, and then this is the way of religion, culture and practices that distort God, think about salvation. The world says you need to find your way back. You need to find your way back. Religion says you need to work your way back. You have to do enough good to work your way back into God's good graces. Fortunately, there are not just two options. Fortunately, Jesus steps onto the scene and says, I've seen this lead to a lot of emptiness. I've seen this lead to a lot of exhaustion. I have another way. I have a third way. Jesus says, it's not find your way back. It's not work your way back. Jesus steps on the scene and says, I'm the way back. I am the way back. If you want to know how to experience salvation, you're never going to find it just doing whatever it is that you want to do. And you'll never find it by trying to be good enough. You'll find it when you realize that you need someone outside of yourself to offer you mercy and grace. And he says, that's what I'm here to do. We see this in numerous places, but I want to point you to just one place in John 14 where Jesus says this very explicitly. And he says it in this conversation that he's having with his closest followers. And John, one of his closest followers, writes this down and eventually hands it down to other people who eventually put it and make it a part of what we know as the Bible. But in John's account, this is how he captured the conversation. He said, Jesus looked at all of us and we were all sitting there in the middle of our own stuff going like, how do we understand this. What do we do with salvation? What do we need to be saved from? And how are we going to be saved? He says, don't let your hearts be troubled. I know this might leave you with some anxiety or stress or worry, or it might be perplexing, it might be hard to understand, but don't let your hearts be troubled, because if you believe in God, then believe also in me. Jesus is saying, I am God. I am the image of the invisible God. If you believe in God, then you also believe in me. And then he gives us this metaphor. He says, my Father's house has many rooms, and if that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? In other words, I have prepared the way there. I'm preparing a place for you there. I prepared a way there. And then he's going to say, even more than that, I am the way there. Here's what he says. Would I have not prepared a place for you? And if I go back and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. And then he tells them, you get it, right? I mean, you know the way. You know the way that I'm going. You ever been listening to someone explain something and you're like, who's going to tell this person that we do not understand? Some of you have been in a class before, where the professor's going, he's like, well, you get this, right? And you're just like, can you back up and start from the beginning? I was speaking at a little town in Georgia about 15 years ago. I was preaching a sermon. I was like 20 minutes in. This person was organizing an event, told me 1,000 people would be there. There were 12. And I was just going on and on. I was like, you know what? I'm going to preach this message like there's just 12 people here, because there are. And so I was giving it my all. And this 8th grade dude, I'll never forget, he raised his hand and he goes, can you slow down? We don't understand what you're saying. It threw me off so badly, because I was like, they don't get any of this. Like, if they missed everything, do I start from the beginning? But I don't have time to slow down. It's going to take me twice as long if I slow down. So how am I going to do this? But you know that feeling where it's like, we're not picking up what you're putting down. We don't understand this, and someone needs to say it. And so Thomas was the bold one. He was the 8th grade kid in my story, who raised his hand and said, Lord, we don't know how to say this, but we don't know where you're going. So how can we know the way? We don't know what you mean. And this is when Jesus drops this bomb where he says, oh, okay, well, let me make it as clear as I can. I am the way. I am the truth. And I am the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I'm the way. I'm the truth. I'm the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. You're not going to find your way back on your own. You're not going to work your way back through self-discipline and self-righteousness. But fortunately, I know the way. I prepared the way. I am the way. And then he goes on to say, and if you really know me, you will know my Father as well. And from now on, you do know him, and you have seen him. It is I. I am the one that you have been looking for. See, the way of the world, I just wonder if we were to play this out and go, well, where does this leave us? I mean, the way of the world seems like it leads us to a place of self-determination, right? I got to make it there on my own. Self-fulfillment, I've got to determine what's fulfilling me. And ultimately, this is the part that is so alarming to me about it. It leads us to a place of self-centeredness. And I've experienced this. You've experienced this. Have you had seasons of life where you just live for yourself? Ultimately, it leaves us empty. It leaves us going, is that really all that life's got? And some of you've had the luxurious vacation where your room only had 3 walls. Some of you have driven the nicest cars, and you've had all that life has offered. You've experienced the most lavish of meals, and you've had that moment where you go, is this really it? It just seems like it just is going to leave us empty. Leaves us asking the question, how can I make myself happy? What do I need to do to make myself happy? And it's as if Jesus is stepping on the scene going, you can't make yourself happy. That's not the way it works. I'm going to help you find happiness and joy, but you can't find it on your own. But then the problem is that we distort God, and on the other side, we have this way of religion that leads us to self-righteousness, to legalism, and to rigid judgment. Have you ever met any Christians, any religious people who come off like that? Yeah, of course, because it's only natural. That's where this would lead. I was in a men's small group a couple of years ago. There were a bunch of guys that were in their late 20s, and they were just kind of getting started out and doing some awesome things. Great group of guys. But there was one guy that stood above the rest. Honestly, his nickname in this group, we called him Boy Wonder, because everything he had ever done in his life had worked out for him. I mean, honestly, it was like he was perfect. We were talking one day, I'll never forget this, about just different accolades, that you've gotten before, most proud moments, awards that you've won, things like that. And we come to him, and he's like, well, 12th grade, I went to a Christian high school, and they named me Christian of the Year. I mean, it was like a record scratch, Everybody was like, I'm sorry, what? That's a thing? He is like, oh, it's a thing, and I won it. I was the Christian of the Year, which is crazy to think. Like, if you win Christian of the Year, don't you in some ways eliminate yourself from being Christian of the Year because it would just create so much pride? It's a circular idea. But that's the kind of person he was. And I'll never forget him saying, we were talking about grace and mercy at the time, and I can never forget him saying, I honestly have a hard time with grace and mercy because what I can understand is the system of good deeds, and I've got it on lock. I know how to run this. I know how to be disciplined enough to do the right thing. And guess what people give me in return? They applaud me for it. They give me awards. They name me Christian of the Year. But he said, but I recognize that where it leads, asking this question of how can I appear good, it leads me to a place where I end up feeling self-righteous, like I've done it on my own. I don't have this sense in me of I need God. I end up becoming legalistic, and I end up becoming incredibly judgmental toward other people. I've worked my way back. What's your problem? Oh, you got divorced? Oh, well, it must have been let me tell you all the things you did wrong. Oh, you didn't get into the school you wanted to get? Well, let me tell you all the things that you did wrong. Oh, you had a hard weekend? Well, let me tell you what your problem is. He said it led me to a place where it wasn't good for me. And it certainly wasn't good for the people around me. It just leaves us exhausted. Going, I gotta keep up. I can't get off the treadmill. I gotta constantly be working my way back. Jesus steps on the scene and says, look, if you're feeling empty because you've tried everything, if you're feeling exhausted because you're trying to work your way, stack up all your good works, let me introduce you to the way of Jesus. In fact, I am the way. And the way of Jesus leads us to a place of sacrifice because we recognize that someone has sacrificed for us. It leads us to a place of selflessness because the very essence of what God did for us was selfless. And it leads us to the same place that Stephen left us last week. It leaves us at a place of surrender where we're asking the question, how can I not pay God back, but how can I just thank Jesus again and again and again and again and again? And some of you know what it feels like to be overwhelmed with emotion, knowing I've tried the best this world has. It left me empty. I tried this way where I was trying to earn my way and it left me exhausted. And fortunately, Jesus, not because I'm good, but because he's good, allowed me to find him. He showed me mercy. He showed me grace. he stepped on the scene and showed me that he's the way. And all I have to do is trust him. Sometimes we make it all very complicated, and I just wonder how many times Jesus was like, it's just not that complicated. I'm not saying it's easy, but you can't find what you need in this world. And you can't work your way back to someone who's perfect and stainless and spotless. No, you need someone to offer their life for you, and that's what I've come to do. The Apostle Paul says it this way, Romans 5:8. He says, but God demonstrates his love, driven and motivated by love, sacrificial and selfless love. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He sacrificed for us. His death paid for our sin. But he didn't stay dead. He was resurrected, showing off his power, showing that, hey, you don't just want to trust someone that loves you, you want to trust someone that is powerful enough to save you. There's no $80,000 private jet that'll get you out of the mess that you're in. You need a God that is willing to step onto the scene and say, I'm going to do for you what you cannot do for yourself. I'm going to die for you because I love you, but I'm going to be resurrected from the dead because there's no one more powerful than I am. And I want to make that incredibly clear. So I don't know where you are. I mean, I've found myself at different seasons of life over here trying to live for the next weekend, live for the next vacation, live for the next achievement, trying to soak up more out of life. I've certainly found myself at a position where I'm trying to stack up all my good deeds. God, have I done enough? God, is this enough? God, what more can I do? Just tell me how high to jump. But today I just want to invite you. Maybe for some of you it's to return to Jesus. Maybe for some of you it's to put your faith in Jesus for the first time and recognize the fact that I can't save myself. I can't find salvation in this world. I can't work my way back. No, I need someone who says, I know where we're going. I've already prepared a path. And I am the way. I'm going to help take you back to be restored to your Creator forever. So if you would bow your head and close your eyes, I would love to extend that invitation today. I know this is something at Athens Church that happens every once in a while, but today's one of those days where I just want to give you the opportunity to memorialize this day and say, that was the day. February 13th, 2022. That was the day where I put my faith in Jesus, where I recognized that I couldn't do it, that only He could. And so if that's you today, if you would like to accept His invitation to trust Him, would you just raise your hand in the air? Not for God, God knows. But really just to make a moment out of this. Sometimes we just need to respond in the moment to say, yes, that is me, and I want to do that today. Sir, all the way up at the balcony, I see you. You guys that are on the third row, I see you. On the other side of the balcony, I see you. Ma'am, right in the middle, I see you. I would love to just pray for you. And maybe this is something you can pray to God yourself. Just say, God, I need you. I need you. I need you. I've tried the way of the world, and I've experienced the depth of the emptiness. Maybe you've tried the way of religion. God, it just is exhausting. And today, I'm recognizing, yes, I need you, and I'm recognizing that you are exactly what I need. that your death on the cross paid for my sin, that your resurrection showed off your power in a way that leaves me going, who else would I trust other than you? And so today I put my trust in you. Today I put my faith in you as my hope. You are my only hope. You are my only hope. God, thank you for Jesus. I just pray that all of us would use this moment to remind ourselves, or to maybe for the first time, dwell on how amazing you are because of what you did and what you still do by saving us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.